Hey everybody, this is a demonstration video on how to solve one of the most common and most perplexing problems in Airtable, and that is, how do we handle multiple different time zones? So whether you're dealing with multiple different events that are happening in different time zones around the globe, or whether you're working with different employees from different time zones, it doesn't make a difference. Whatever situation you're working in, if it involves multiple time zones, this video will be able to help you out. What we're looking at here is a table of many different events that all take place in many different time zones. And our goal is twofold. Our goal is, number one, we want to see the official time of the event in the local time of the event, meaning that this event takes place in this time zone at this time. So that's number one. I call that the official time of the event. But the second thing we want is we also want the time of the event converted into the local time of the user who is currently logged into the system. So before we get into how you actually solve this problem, I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Scott Rose, and I am the CGO of Scott World. That's the Chief Geek Officer. I have been a software developer for over 30 years, and my two specialties are Airtable and FileMaker. So if you're looking for Airtable training, Airtable consulting, or Airtable development, feel free to reach out to me at my website, which is scottworld.com. Okay, so now let's get back to our solution here. And to review, we're trying to accomplish two things here. We want events displayed in their own local time zone, which I call the official time of the event. And what I mean by this is that these times should never change. So no matter who logs into the system, no matter where they're located, these times should remain static. They stay exactly as they were typed into the system. But the second thing we're trying to accomplish is a time that doesn't stay consistent. We want a time that's very fluid, and that's what I call the user's local time of the event. And what that means is when somebody logs into the system from somewhere around the world, they need to see the event converted into their own local time zone to understand when that event's taking place from their point of view. So let's take a look at what time zone I'm in right now. I'm going to bring up my Mac system preferences here. We'll go into date and time, and you'll see that I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And so that is Pacific Daylight Time. That's the same as Los Angeles. So if I look in my table here, I see that I have a Los Angeles event here. It's taking place on April 30th at 8:30 a.m. Los Angeles time. And if I look over here, yep, there it is. In my time, it's taking place at the exact same time because we're in the same time zone. But then we have completely different scenarios for all these other events. For example, this event is taking place in Sydney at 8:30 a.m. on this date, Sydney time, which is April 30th. And look at this. This column here, my local time of that event is actually the day before, April 29th at 3:30 p.m. That's because there's such a large, time zone gap between Vancouver and Sydney. So what you're looking at here is really the end result. This table is perfectly functioning, and I'm going to make this available as a free demo. I will put the link in the video description to where you can download this table, and you can install it into your own Airtable workspace, and you can play with it, manipulate it, and do whatever you want with it. So I guess the question we really want to ask is, why is this such a hard problem to manage in the first place? Well, I think that the main underlying problem here is that Airtable doesn't enable you to attach a time zone to a date field. Yeah, I know that you can see some time zones here, but I actually created this field on my own. So this is not part of the time zone features that are built into Airtable. In fact, I think we should take a look at what time zone features are built in. So whenever you create a date field, in fact, why don't we create a brand new date field over here? I'm just going to call this date, and we will choose date. And I'm going to include a time field here. And you'll notice that we don't have any time zone options except for this one option right here, which is use the same time zone, GMT, for all collaborators. So GMT stands for Greenwich Mean Time, and that is the 000 time zone. And then all the other time zones are compared to that time zone. So, for example, Los Angeles is GMT -7. Actually, you can see their offsets right here. It's called the offset. So Los Angeles is GMT -7, Chicago is GMT -5. And so GMT is, the 0 time zone. So this is how Airtable works. When you turn this option on, and then you click Save, whatever date and time that you type into this field, it will remain static. It will remain consistently at this date and this time, no matter who logs into the system, no matter where they're logging in from. So for most people, if you're not juggling multiple different time zones in your system, this is the option that you want to turn on. So for most of the time out there, for most people out there, you want that option turned on. So let me show you what happens here if I go into my time zone here, and let's say that I change my time zone. So let's say I'm just going to randomly click somewhere, Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay, so I've now switched to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm going to refresh my page here to simulate that I'm logging into the system. And this stays exactly the same. And that's exactly what we were hoping was going to happen because we turned on that setting. So let's clear this out for a minute. And now let's go back in here. And we are now going to turn off this setting. Now, when you turn off this setting, suddenly the date and time in this field becomes fluid. It actually changes the time based on who's logging into the system and where they're logging in from. So let me give you an example of that. So right now, I am in the Eastern Daylight Time zone. So I'm going to type in a date and time here. So let's choose today, May 1st, and we will choose, that's fine, we'll just leave it at that, 9:49 p.m. That's actually the current time. So that has been typed into that date field. Now, what's interesting is that Airtable has invisibly in the background, it has remembered that I'm in the Eastern time zone and I'm the one that typed this into the system. So invisibly in the background, Airtable remembers what time zone this was typed in at. And so watch what happens if I pretend that I'm another user. Let's just go back to my current time zone again because I'm currently in Vancouver, Canada. That's 3 hours earlier than Eastern time. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh my browser. So I want you to keep your eye over here to watch what happens. I'm going to refresh my browser. And Airtable has changed the time. It's changed it because it is making the assumption that the person who typed in that time originally was typing it in for their time zone, and people that are logging in from other time zones need to have that time adjusted for them. Now, for a lot of situations, this also makes sense, right? If somebody on their end is expecting something to be done by 9 p.m. their time, well, on your end, if you're logging in 3 hours earlier than them, from a time zone which is 3 hours earlier than them, then you would want to see that they're expecting that done by 6 p.m. So there are many use cases where you would want this date and time to change. So that's a quick overview of how the date field works when it comes to times. So it's not letting me click here. Let me just refresh my, oh, there we go. For some reason it got frozen for a second. Okay, so that was a brief overview of how the date field works. And that is going to be the key to your success in understanding how to make the rest of this work. So I want to let you know that we have a couple different fields here that end up resulting in time fields. And what I've done is I've put a little field description here so you can know whether you need that GMT option turned on or off for these fields. So for this field, you definitely need the GMT option turned on. If you turn it off, your system won't work properly. Same thing with this field. This lets you know you need to turn this on. And this field is different. This field, you actually need the GMT option turned off. So I gave you those little tips throughout your system, throughout this database here, so that'll help you remember. So let's just go through these columns one at a time here from left to right and discuss what's going on. So our first column here is the event name, just a regular text field you can type into. And this is a regular date and time field with the GMT option turned on. And once again, it's because we always want these times to, stay as they are. The next field here is what I call the official time zone of the event. And these time zones have to be typed in a very, very specific way. Now, you'll see that I've made this field a single select field. And so I've given people an option to choose one of these time zones. But in order for this to work, you have to format the names of these time zones exactly how Airtable expects you to do that. So Airtable has given you a support document called Supported Time Zones for Set Time Zone. And the set time zone feature is something we're going to use in a little bit. We haven't gotten to that yet. But these are the different time zones that Airtable supports. You don't need to worry about those single quotes or the commas around those time zones. All you need to worry about for now is just the words that are inside those single quotes. So make sure that whatever time zones you're going to be working with, make sure that they exactly match one of the time zones in this list. And I will give you a link to this page as well in the notes for this video. Okay, so this field is what enables us to look at it as a human and say, oh, okay, I see. This Honolulu event is taking place at 8:30 a.m. Honolulu time, right? This is for us to understand. This is for us as the human to understand. But here's the thing. Airtable doesn't yet understand that. And so we've got to let Airtable know that this is taking place in Honolulu time. Because we have turned on the GMT option here, what Airtable is thinking is that, oh, all these times are GMT times. But that's actually not true from our point of view. From our point of view, we know that the Honolulu time zone is actually offset from the GMT time zone. You can actually see the answer right here. Honolulu is 10 hours earlier than GMT time zone. But Airtable doesn't know that that's what we're referring to. So what we need to do is take this one step at a time here, which leads us to our next column, offset from GMT. So this is a formula field, and we're going to go in here and customize this, and you'll see that there's a very extensive formula in here. Now, I was able to pull this information, like what the names of these different formulas were, out from another document on Airtable support site, which is called Formula Field Reference. Now, this is not the best page in the world. They don't really give great examples. They don't really explain these well. So, if you're having trouble understanding these date and time functions and how they work, I would recommend either reaching out to me or going into the Airtable community online and ask people, or you could just experiment around with a lot of trial and error. So let's go back to our system here. And basically, what we are saying here is that we are telling Airtable to figure out the difference in time in hours between GMT time and the official time zone of the event that we have chosen. So I'm not going to dissect this too much because you could just copy and paste this into your own system once you download the sample database that I'm providing for you. But basically, what this is saying is, hey, give me the date and time of this event in Honolulu time, and then hey, give me the date and time of this event in GMT time. So this formula is getting two different times, and then it's subtracting one from the other, and it's subtracting based on hours. So the end result of this formula is the number of hours difference between these two time zones. Because remember, Airtable thinks that this is GMT time zone, but we are thinking in Honolulu time zone. So the difference between those two time zones is -10 from GMT. That's the offset from GMT. Okay, one other quick thing on a side note I just want to point out here. Whenever you're doing math like this with dates in Airtable, you want to make sure, this is one of the most important things, you want to make sure that your times are in 24-hour time, which is Army time. And you do that by putting the two H's capitalized like that. So you see my two H's are capitalized. And the way that I know that is because there's another page, which I'll give you the link to, which is called Supported Format Specifiers. This lets you know all the different codes that you can use to make your date and time appear a certain way. So if you want to do Army time, you do double H. If you only do single H, that is still a 24-hour clock, yes, but it's going to drop the leading 0. So, 1 o'clock in the morning would just be 1, but here, 1 o'clock in the morning would be 0, 1. So anyways, you can explore this later, all the different ways for you to format your date and time. But let's go back to our solution now. So I just want to let you know that this formula is not going to work properly if you try to do it in 12-hour time, because it's going to look at 3 a.m. and 3 p.m. as the exact same thing. It's going to give you a result of 0. So 24-hour time will actually enable it to do the math properly. Oh, and there's one other thing you need to know about this as well. You can specify AM or PM with these codes as well. You can see a capital A gives you AM or PM in capital letters, and a lowercase a gives you AM, PM in lowercase letters. Well, very important for you to know is that you should not include those letter A's in your formula. If you do, you're going to get an error message in Airtable. It chokes on the AM, PM thing when you're doing math with time. So it doesn't know how to interpret it. So that's why you need to drop the AM, PM, and you need to switch your times to 24-hour time. So that is going to be the key to your success there. So once you finish building this formula, you can actually instantly tell if you have the right numbers or not, because it's widely published everywhere what the offsets are for these different cities. So then we need to figure out what I call the actual GMT time of the event. Because if you remember, over here, this is what Airtable thinks is the GMT time of our event, but that's not really true, right? Because it's not a GMT event. So we want to tell Airtable, hey, take what you think is the GMT time of this event, apply the offset to it, and then you'll get the real GMT time of this event. So in other words, Airtable thinks that this is an 8:30 a.m. GMT time event. But if this event was in Honolulu at that time, then the actual GMT time of that event would be 10 hours later at 6:30 p.m. So let's see what that formula looks like. It's actually very simple. We just use the date add formula, which enables you to add numbers into dates and times. So you also tell it what you are adding, what unit you're adding in. Are you adding an hour? Are you adding a week? Are you adding a month? Are you adding a second or a minute? Actually, I don't actually know if it supports seconds. I think it might only support minutes. And the reason I don't know is because they don't really explain in the formula field reference what different units are supported. So again, this is more of a trial and error thing. Hopefully Airtable at some point will really flesh out the documentation here, but you're sort of left to your own devices to sort of figure out which units are going to work. From my own trial and error, I actually found that the word hour and hours, plural, both work. So basically, this is a very simple formula. All we're doing is taking the official time of the event, and then we actually want to subtract the offset. So we want to do the reverse. We want to get it's a -1 times the offset from GMT. So you may remember from math class that if you put a minus sign before a value in parentheses, it actually reverses the value. So if it was a positive value, it becomes negative, and if it was a negative value, it becomes positive. So why are we doing this? The reason we're doing this is because they don't have a date subtract function. They just have a date add function. So this, in essence, is creating a subtraction for us. So that's what we're doing. So basically we're taking what Airtable thinks is the GMT time of the event, and we're subtracting what we know is the offset of that event. And so that results in what is the actual GMT time of the event. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that I also have this little field description here that lets you know that your time zones must match the name of the officially accepted time zone names in that one page. Okay, so getting back here, we've got our calculation right, but you have to make sure that when you go into formatting here, the GMT option is turned on. And now that leaves us with our final field here, the piece de resistance of our entire system here. Let's take a look at what this formula is. Wow, look at this. Does this look familiar? This is the exact same formula that we just used for actual GMT time of event. It's the exact same formula, but the only difference is now we are turning this off. So the reason this is now turned off is because it will take the GMT time of the event and convert it into the user's local time zone. So that's it. It's as simple as that. And in fact, because we didn't even really need this at all except for illustrative purposes, you can actually delete this field from your system altogether. Or you can hide it. And you can hide this from your users as well. Don't delete that one. You could delete that first one I mentioned, but that second one is necessary. But to be on the safe side, just hide both of those fields. So now your users don't need to see a cluttered interface. They can just see just the necessary fields, and it will act exactly like they expect it to act. 2 different times for each event. One is the official time, and one is the user's local time. And that's it. I hope you really found that helpful. If you need any Airtable programming, consulting, or training for your organization, be sure to reach out to me at scottworld.com. We'll talk soon. Take care.